Welcome to Fearlessly Made You. I am your host, Kristie Tobias. Joining me today are guests just striving to dominate in their personal and professional lives while answering the question, what does it mean to be fearlessly made? On this episode of Fearlessly Made You, I am super pumped and excited to have one of my lovely friends, wine friends as well. We are partners in wine, Kaycee Lagarde. Kaycee is the Public Information Officer for the City of Pensacola, so all things communication. Kaycee, welcome to Fearlessly Made You.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. This is my first podcast ever.
I love it.
This is new.
I love it. Well, you know, it's kind of fun because we have a mutual friend. If you guys have been following the Fearlessly Made You podcast, Rachel Smith was on one of the episodes and it was one of her first podcasts ever as well.
Yes, I listened to it and she did a fantastic job.
And so are you.
I love Rachel.
I love her too. And I love you. So I'm glad that you're here because it's so cool. The thing that Kaycee and I bonded over was definitely wine. But we also went to the same church together or go to the same church together. But wine was our bonding moment. Let's be real honest. So it's just kind of cool to be able to like chat. We do have our glasses of wine for those of you that are listening on the, or watching, I should say, on the YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast, we have our wine. We have cheers, a little sip before we get started. And then Kaycee, what I would love for you to do is I love for everyone to get to know each of my guests on Fearlessly Made You. So I'd love for you just to share a little bit about who you are.
All right. I'll try not to give my whole life story because it might be, we might be here a while. But I grew up here. So this is home. I grew up in Pace and have lived in Pensacola my entire adult life. Went to UWF, stayed local for that. My parents still live in Pace. Love the area. But I'm actually a Mississippi native, which you probably wouldn't guess by my lack of
any type of accent.
I was born there. I was born in Ocean Springs and lived there for like the first 3 years of my life. So, and my dad's job brought us here, which I'm so grateful for. Not that I don't love Mississippi, but I think this is just what feels like home to me. Yeah. So, but my mom is from Michigan, so I always think maybe I got some kind of neutral hybrid accent. My dad doesn't really have any kind of accent except maybe a little bit of a Cajun one. So
interesting.
Yeah, so good food in the Lagarde family, which I appreciate. My roots there, and even my mom has learned how to make an amazing gumbo, even though she's from Michigan. She has learned well over the years. So, I started my career in journalism, actually. That's what I went to school for. Really had no idea what I wanted to do when I went to school. I was just taking my general education classes, kind of figuring it out. Took a journalism 101 class and figured out, hey, I kind of like this. Because news writing is a lot different than writing an essay. And so I kind of enjoyed the structure of it. And I've always been into English and grammar, so it kind of fit well with me. So I studied that in school, got my degree in journalism, and worked at Pensacola News Journal for a year, right out of college, basically. And then impulsively and abruptly quit my job to go to Spain. So that was a nice little break in my career.
Well,
and, I know I said I wouldn't tell my life story, and now I feel like I am. So I'll try.
I love it.
Try to wrap it up. But
you are good. We want to hear about you.
But yeah, so went to Spain, worked a couple of odd jobs, and I came back, went back to the News Journal. Really thought that's what I wanted to pursue, was being a journalist. And then an opportunity came up at Escambia County at the time to work in their public relations office, and took that opportunity. And it just seemed right at the time because print journalism, I don't know if you guys know, it's kind of, I'm not going to say dying because I think it's just changing. It's evolving.
That's fair.
I always hated it when people were like, journalism is dead, or print journalism is dead. I'm like, no, I will cling to my print newspapers forever. And it's so important. I still think that to this day. And I work very closely with journalists still in my current job. So I was at the county for a few years, got great experience there working in, government, public information life. And then when Mayor Robinson got elected, I was hired over at the city as the public information officer. So that has been a ride, as you can imagine. Started there in 2019 and then everything happened.
All the things.
Yeah. So that's me in a nutshell. I mean, I kind of focused on career a little bit, I think, but that's something that's important to me and a big part of my life. So
yeah,
here I am.
I love that. Well, and, we're going to continue to hit on career a little bit because as the public information officer, and Kaycee knows this, but for those of you that don't know, I had the chance to do a little bit of work with the City of Pensacola. When Mayor Robinson was elected, he had a transition team that came on board and just basically did a full analysis of where's the city now and where does the city need to go.
Yep.
And so in doing that, I did the cultural governance operations analysis. So got the chance to work across every single department in the city, including public informations. And it was before Kaycee came on board, but it was funny. I think we talked about this when those transitions were happening and the position became available. I was asked about you.
Really?
Uh-huh.
I don't know if I knew this.
I don't know if I ever told you. But it was hey, do you know Kaycee? And I was like, I didn't even know why anyone was asking me at the time. I didn't realize it was about the job, but I was like, I love her. Yes. And so, and they're like, that's all we need to know.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. But no, it was so cool because seeing you, and they had a few candidates. So it was a very interesting process, and they were very selective and very specific about what they were looking for.
Yes.
So.
And it was very difficult for me at the time because I tend to be kind of a private person when it comes to things like that until they're official.
Mm-hmm.
And applying for a job like that, of course, everything in government locally, especially in Florida, is public record.
Yes.
And so there was a lot of interest in who was applying for that job. And, the list of candidates was posted online. And I had just recently told my boss that I applied. And then all of my coworkers at the county are congratulating me when I didn't even have the job yet. And because I'm the type of person who, I might tell my close friends that I applied for a job, but I'm not going to post on Facebook, hey, I have a job interview. Can you guys pray for me?
Right.
I'll keep you posted. I'm like, no, you will find out when I have the job. I'll make an announcement, but I don't want to get my hopes up.
Yeah.
So it was I remember that just being such a difficult time for me because I was in my head about it. I was like, I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get it. There are other very qualified candidates. And it was just a challenge for me because it was so out of my comfort zone, really.
Was there some fear there because in hearing what you're saying, it's like there's a little bit of that fear of the unknown. Because if you don't get it and your name is out there, it's kind of embarrassing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it comes with the territory. Like I said, just working in a public field, public
Mm-hmm.
sector, it's just a different animal than private sector.
Yes.
And there was a good bit of interest, and there definitely was some fear on my end.
Yeah.
Because I tend to be kind of a people pleaser. And like I said, I can be kind of private about that side of my life until I'm ready to make an announcement about an official change. I don't like people necessarily seeing the in-between.
Yes, I get that.
So that was hard for me because I was afraid of not getting it and then having to explain to everyone who knew, which was a lot of people,
Everyone, yeah,
that I didn't get it. So it was interesting and it was a good challenge for me. Mm-hmm. And obviously it worked out.
Yes, it did.
So that was very exciting. I remember getting that call from Grover and him asking me if I wanted a change and if I was ready to come over to the city. And I said, absolutely. And here I am.
Here you are. Well, and I think something that's really interesting is I love hearing your kind of history leading up to this role. And then the true honesty and dynamics of there's so much uncertainty when you take a little bit of a leap of faith and a little bit of jump into something that you would love, but it's going to be different. It's going to be a challenge.
I was terrified even accepting the job. It was step one was getting the job.
Yes.
Step two, I was like, okay, now that I have the job, I actually have to do the job. I can't just sell myself in an interview and then get to work and just coast.
Right.
But I never could have anticipated everything that has happened since I've been at the city. I mean, it's just been crisis after crisis.
Yes.
And don't get me wrong, the city is great. I love working there. There are so many great people. But I mean, we had the NAS Pensacola terrorist attack back in December 2019. The next day
right after
the next day we had a ransomware attack on the city, which made national headlines because of its proximity to the terrorist attack. I really don't think national media would have cared on a normal day, but it was like everyone was trying to make that connection that, okay, is this related? Because a lot of people who are from out of town too, they don't realize NAS Pensacola is not in city limits. It's not directly connected. So they were trying to make that connection. So that was a lot of experience for me when it comes to doing national media interviews. And I remember being quoted in the New York Times, and it was so surreal.
I remember that too.
I was like, that's my name. I mean, obviously, I wish it hadn't happened. It was terrible, but there was still that moment where, like, that's kind of cool. So I had that moment. But
I mean, because that's also like, that's your job, is to have information being like in one of the top publications in the United States. Like, cool, we're in this.
This is happening. So didn't expect that on a random Monday. Because the mayor mentioned it at his press conference that he does every week, and then it hit local news and then very quickly escalated. And I was getting calls like one after the other from all of the national outlets. So there was that. And then, of course, we all know what happened in 2020.
Bless it. And on top of that, also the hits from the hurricane. Which I'm sure was interesting.
Yes. The mayor and I will kind of joke sometimes that, it was a bad year when a major hurricane is an afterthought. Because sometimes I find myself talking about everything that's happened since I've been at the city, or saying, I went through this crisis and COVID and this. And I'll get done and then a minute later say, oh, yeah, and a hurricane.
The hurricane. Small things.
I mean, and it was a big deal.
It was a big deal.
I had damage at my house. I had trees everywhere. I was working nonstop. I was without power for 9 or 10 days, I think.
You had some of the people from church that came and took trees off your house or something.
I did, and I'm so grateful. Shout out to Legacy House and the guys there who came on a Saturday to my house. I don't know what I would have done otherwise. I actually couldn't even be there to help them because I was still working. Just pumping out information mostly about debris pickup. People get really passionate about when their debris is going to be picked up after a hurricane. Let me tell you.
It's probably because the only thing that they think that they can control or that seems controllable is, when does this go away?
Right. And we all went through it. I live in the city, and so it was... You couldn't even see my house when I pulled up to it after we got all the debris piled up in front of it. So trust me, I went through it too. I always tell people that. I'm like, working for the city doesn't get me special treatment.
No.
So I know what you're going through because I still have debris outside of my house 3 weeks later or however long it was. But
it was a minute.
But the volume of it was just so much. So.
Well, and you bring up a really good, interesting point too, which is hearing some of the things that you do. Like, what does day in the life of the public information officer for the city of Pensacola look like on a non-COVID? So I'm thinking, like, as you were in that role prior to COVID, and then thinking about the transition with COVID and all of because, in the United States, we had some very localized decisions that were allowed to be made. And so that falls on the city leaders, and it falls on city communication, which is just a whole thing in and of itself.
Yeah. So a typical day in the life for me, if there is one, I mean, if I'm working in the office, which typically I am, even during COVID, I was in the office unless I'm at an event or something like that. I mean, social media is a big part of it. I try to monitor that, see what people are saying, share information. I do press releases for the city. I do media relations. So any media requests come through me. If they want to do an interview with the mayor, if they want to do an interview with city staff, or have a request just for general information, they'll go through me. So it's hard to say what a typical day is because it just kind of ebbs and flows. Like, for example, Monday, the mayor does his weekly press conference. There are some days where I don't get any calls from the media. And then Monday was one of those days where I got like 8.
All the calls.
And yeah, I'm like, they're so needy today. But love you guys. If any media members are listening.
It's all out of love and positivity.
And
it's just a reality.
Yeah, it is. But I understand that life because coming from being a print journalist, I was the person on the other end of the phone saying, hey, I know I just called you 15 minutes ago, but I really need this thing. I'm on deadline. Do you mind? And I hated being that person, but sometimes you have to be.
Yeah.
And right now, too, their deadlines are now. Mm-hmm. It's changed so much where it's not just, whenever we go to print or when we go on air. They want it now because everything with the internet is so immediate. So that was kind of a side note there. But
no, but that's important.
But yeah, so day in the life, it's like, I never know. I mean, I never expected on the morning of December 6th, 2019 to get a call from our city administrator saying there's an active shooter at NAS. And just, I remember my heart sinking, of course. Of course,
yes.
So days like that are just so...
Are you just like
out
on
of the norm,
like full 24 hour, like, this is what I do all day is just connect here?
Yeah, I try to have a good work-life balance. I really do, because so much of my job is being on social media and reading comments, and I don't have that luxury of just disconnecting.
Yeah.
You know, some people are like, oh, I don't even have Facebook. Like, I have to, because not only just to have the business account, you have to have a personal account. Thanks, Facebook.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
But just to monitor what people are saying and see if there's anything that needs to be addressed. So I am technically on call always. I'm the only public information officer for the city. I do have one position beneath me that's a public information specialist. And so that person is very helpful, and it's nice to have that support. Yeah. But when it comes to after hours emergencies and things like that, I'm it. And just weekend events with the mayor and things like that. So sometimes it can be hard to really unplug. You know, if I hear my email go off, I have to look at it just to make sure it's not anything important. But there were times, especially during COVID, where I would try to just take a day and like not even look, because as you can imagine, I mean, especially in the early days of COVID, when we're getting out information and we're processing it at the same time, and the mayor's making decisions based on what he hears from healthcare providers and, you know, the leaders in that field, and everyone's reacting to it. Yes. When he did the mask mandate, I mean, we just got so many comments. I mean, just hundreds of comments, positive and negative. But of course, it's easy to focus on the negative sometimes.
Always.
Like, those are the ones you're going to remember.
Yep.
So I tried to have a good work-life balance during that time as much as possible, because I feel like, especially when everything was shut down, I was very prone to just stay at the office late because there was nothing else to do. I mean, gyms weren't open. You know, I love going to Ride Society.
Yes.
Gyms were not open. Rides. Like, nothing was open. And so I'm like, well, I might as well just stay up here and do some work. So I had to kind of try to stop doing that.
Yeah. Well, and you, Kaycee, hearing so much about your work and what you do, I feel like it's a perfect time to just like cheers the badass woman that you are.
Thank you.
I mean, we don't always celebrate that. And for those of you listening, we are having this lovely cab, one of Kaycee's favorite types of wine. So we'll talk about that a little later. But
I do love a good Cabernet.
Yes, you do. So we are really enjoying and embracing and celebrating that, because this has been a rough ass year. Let's be real honest.
It really has. I think I've aged 5 years in the past year.
Yeah.
But
you've aged gracefully.
Thank you. It's been a lot, but I'm truly grateful for the experience that I've had. And there's no better way to learn than to just be thrown into the fire.
Amen to that. You're not wrong. You're not wrong at all.
So I try to look at the positive, and as difficult as it has been, we've all had difficult moments over the past year, especially since 2020.
True.
Year to remember or forget. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I hate to think about forgetting a year, but I think so much has happened that it's kind of like, I mean, it's there.
Easy to kind of skip over sometimes where you're like, oh yeah, that happened last year. Oh wait, no, it must have been 2019 because it was before COVID.
Pre-COVID, post-COVID is what we will eventually get to as we are in the midst of all of this.
I know. It's still here. So
it is. Well, you know, I think too, what's so important is, of course, celebrating the wins, which is, like you said, being grateful for the work you get to do, but also that conversation that I always have around like the fearless existence that we have and what that means and seeing how you've operated. You know, I'm curious for you, how have you gotten to this place? And I think this is a place where you're at, but of course, you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you're at. It's that ability to be fearless, so not allowing that fear to own you, but really owning your journey and not letting that be the only piece of it, is that fear. Because there's a lot of uncertainties that happened within your role, but there are a lot of uncertainties just you getting to your role. So like, what does it mean for you to embrace that fearless existence?
I think that so many things in life are high risk, but high reward. So I think in order to really grow and achieve the things that we want to achieve and really progress in life, we have to take risks. Yeah. And with risks comes fear. So I've definitely experienced that. We all have. I mean, many times in my life where something is a big risk and I'm afraid it's not going to work out. I've definitely gotten a lot better at not stressing about things that I cannot control. That's been a big one for me because
that's a hard one.
I would start stressing about work, especially right when I started at the city and the mayor and I were still building that relationship and that trust. And I was just like, I don't know what he's going to say at his press conference, or I don't know what I should do or what I should say. Yeah. And just got better at recognizing that there's so much about my job that is out of my control.
Yeah.
And in life too, but that's a big part of my life too. So I think that has helped me a lot, just trying to let go of that fear of things that I have no control over.
Yeah.
Because who am I helping by stressing about something where I can only control what I can control? So I tried to kind of shift my focus on that. Like, okay, I'll do my best. I'll do my part. And the rest is up to them or up to the universe, you know?
I love it.
So that's helped. And I'm still not perfect, but it's helped me get through a lot. And, but yeah, I mean, fearlessly made, I think, just means not being without fear, but just recognizing your ability to overcome it and not being afraid to take risks in order to grow.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of what it means to me. I think, you know, I mentioned earlier, I think one of the scariest things I've ever done, actually, just because I would like to have that control over my life, was I mentioned briefly when I quit my job and went to Spain. Probably the most impulsive thing I've ever done. I was like 22 and had just started in my career. And just one day I was at my desk at the News Journal, which is now Southtown Apartments. It was in the old
News Journal,
affectionately called the Cave. So I had no windows. So I was in my little cubicle.
I see why you decided to go to Spain.
I was sitting there and I was so young, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm ready to do the 9 to 5, even though I was doing it and I had been for a year. So I started looking into different things online and decided to go be an au pair in Spain.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I was a nanny for 4 children at 22 years old, which was a lot, especially with the language barrier.
Because you didn't speak Spanish, did you?
I spoke a little bit. So that was my minor in college.
Got you.
And, but the pro and con of being an au pair is, I mean, it was a con because I would have liked to practice my Spanish more. But my host parents were like, we only want you to speak English with the children. Got it. I can do that. I speak English. But, but I say all of that to say, you know, that was a very scary decision to just abruptly quit my job and go to Madrid for 2 months. And then when I came back, I definitely had that moment where I was all dramatic about it and like, oh, I've ruined my life. I've ruined my career. I'm never going to work in journalism again. What have I done?
Right.
Like, I mean, I hate to say I regretted it because I didn't, but at the same time, you know, little 23-year-old me, because I think I have a summer birthday, so I'd turned 23 while I was there. I came back and ended up working at like an interior design firm just because I needed a job to pay my rent. And like I said, was a little bit dramatic, as you are when you're young. And so I thought I had ruined everything. And clearly I bounced back.
Just a little bit. But you found your footing.
But that, you know, I never would have had that experience if I hadn't overcome that fear and taken a risk. And I'm so grateful for that experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I had a magical time over there. And like I said, I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I was terrified at the time. So,
well, and that brings up a really good point, which is there are people that are listening and that are out there that are like, that's nice. I don't know if I could allow myself to not let the fear drive me. So if you wanted to give advice or feedback to people who are trying to figure out what it means for them to not allow fear to own their lives or to own their decisions, what would that feedback be?
I kind of touched on it earlier, just the way I cope with it, which is just to focus on the reward, I guess, and not the risk. Mm-hmm. So I think that's helpful. Also, another thing, and this might sound pessimistic, but sometimes I will ask myself, okay, what's the actual worst case scenario?
Absolutely.
Because sometimes when you really break it down, you know, if you're applying for a job and you're so afraid that you're not going to get it, okay, what's the worst case scenario?
Right.
You applied for the job and you still don't have the job that you already didn't have. So you might as well try. So things like that, where sometimes I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to be successful and to win every time or to achieve a goal every time. But you're not going to get everything you want. It's not always going to work out. But if you never try, then you're definitely not going to get what you want. You know,
Absolutely.
It's like if you don't buy a lottery ticket, you're not going to win the lottery. So
that's true. That's a good way to think
like
about
that
it.
Kind of thing. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I would win the lottery. I never buy a lottery ticket, so my odds are not
in your favor.
Very good. So I think it's, like I said, that kind of high risk, high reward, where if you take risks and overcome that fear, you never know what the reward might be.
Yeah. I love that.
So,
well, and it brings up the good point around reward, because I always think about there's so many things, first of all, especially for you, and you've touched on this a little bit, but I definitely want to kind of ground our audience a little bit in this, which is the art of rewarding our self-care and rewarding our balance in the way that we operate in life. Because to your point, there's the opportunity to take those risks to kind of achieve what you want. But there's also the opportunity, like you knew, you were like, I need to just like go experience life and I need to take care of me. So 2 questions for you, and it's around that self-care and balance. So question 1 is, you touched on it a little bit where you're like, I do have to find time to take care of myself. So I'm curious as to what that looks like for you. And then we also touched on this a little bit, but want to know like a little more from you, is that wine that you love, that you can't live without, and what that looks like as well. Because as for me, that wine balance is very important to me as well as part of my self-care. Right. So would love to get your thoughts on that.
So when it comes to self-care, for me personally, the beach is my spot.
Yes.
Which is why it was so hard for me when the bridge was closed, because I live in East Pensacola Heights. I'm like 15, 20 minutes from the beach. That turned my 15 or 20 minute drive into an hour
Yes.
plus. So that was hard, side note. But because that's really I hate to sound cliche, but that's really my happy place.
Yeah.
Like when I'm at the beach, whether it's sunrise, sunset, middle of the day, getting some vitamin D. I love to swim in the Gulf. Like it's so refreshing to me.
Yeah.
I say sunrise. I can't remember the last time I watched a sunrise. I'm not a morning person. It's happened a few times, but
Maybe not on purpose.
more likely sunset. But I do love a good sunrise if I can drag myself out of bed. So that's really kind of my happy place and my go-to spot. But I require a lot of me time. Some people might think I'm an extrovert just because of my job and because I'm always interacting with people. And I am a very social person. I love my friends. I love my family, just spending time with people. But if I don't get enough me time, I mean, I live alone. I've lived alone since like 2012, I think. And I love it. It's the best. So I just require a lot of that time to recharge, whether it's just sitting at home doing a puzzle or reading a book or walking in my neighborhood or something like that. I just need that time. Also, thrifting for me is very therapeutic.
It's very interesting, and I love that.
I love thrifting. It's really, like, it doesn't even matter. I'll go sometimes and just roam around and not, if I don't find anything, I'm not going to buy something just to buy it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, side note, I think a lot of people don't realize that about thrifting because they'll be like, you're such a good thrifter. You always find the best deals or the best items. And I'm like, but you don't see all of the times I walk out of there empty-handed.
Right.
So I think you really have to like the hunt and just like, I'll put my earbuds in, listen to a podcast or some Billie Holiday Pandora, whatever I'm feeling.
Share that love of Billie Holiday. Yes.
Get an iced coffee and just walk around Waterfront Rescue. And if I find something great, if I don't, I still enjoyed looking through old things and junk and treasures and whatever else. So that's very, like I said, weirdly therapeutic for me. But I think it's just important to recognize what it is that is your comfort and what helps you recharge and reset. And it looks different for everyone. I mean, some people might be like, oh, I need a night out with my girlfriends and that's what really does it for me.
Yeah.
Or they might just need a bubble bath or something. I think you just have to recognize that and set aside that time and not be afraid to say no. If someone says, hey, do you want to hang out? And you're like, I've hung out with people every night this week.
Right.
But I really want to see this friend, so I don't want to say no. Just say no,
Yeah. Take care of you.
Politely. You can just say, don't tell off your friends, but but just say, it's been a long week. Can we do something next week or something? So I think as a society, we've gotten a lot better at recognizing those boundaries and being okay with it.
I love it. I love that.
Oh, and wine.
Oh, yes. Let us not forget wine.
I couldn't forget.
Yes.
So we're drinking Cabernet right now.
Yes, we are. Cheers to that.
Is definitely my go-to, I would say. It's funny, I used to hate red wine. I would only drink white wines and then ended up acquiring a taste for red. And now I drink that probably more than white if I go out, unless it's really brutally hot outside like it is today.
Oh, girl. But this is a nice little chilled. We chilled it for you.
It's chilled.
Because it was hot.
Yeah. But I love it. Like, you and I both love Magnolia.
We do.
I have to give them a shout out.
Yes. Shout out to Magnolia. And Kylie and I have already chatted. She's definitely going to be making a little podcast appearance at some point.
So exciting. So Kristie and I will run into each other at the mag occasionally.
Yes.
And
magical times.
Yes. And that's like one of my favorite things. It's just going there. Well, I can walk there, first of all, which is a huge blessing. I love it. I love it so much.
Yes.
So
we may be going there after this.
Love walking. Yes. But going there, a place like that that's so cozy in the wintertime with a glass of Cabernet is just like so comforting to me. So yeah. For the summer, I switch around. I'll drink like a Pinot Grigio or something. But but cab is where it's at.
I love it, girl. Kaycee, you've been a delight and a joy. I have really loved learning new things about you that I didn't know, but also just, I love that you embrace, the best way to put everything that you've shared is you've embraced the fear and uncertainty of things that are uncomfortable, and you've kind of built this life for yourself that's so beautiful and full of that ability to be like, I will always take care of me, but it's okay to take the risk because the risk is worth the reward, which I love. I love that you said that. So thank you so much for being on Fearlessly Made You.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you, and I love you as a friend. Yes. And I'm just so grateful that our paths crossed, and hopefully this chat can be helpful to someone.
Absolutely. I know it will be. And guys, as much as you've loved Kaycee, make sure that you guys stay tuned to the next episode of Fearlessly Made You.